afternoon all, and here we are. We're going to do a bonus video on completion of your Bugs Bunny quilt that we've already started. This is the SDS1264 Bugsy Bunny quilt, SDS1264 that we've already completed. How do we put a binding on? Well, the first thing we've got to find out is how much binding fabric do we need. Easy. Our selvage to selvage width of your fabric usually comes in a certain width. Most of our 100% cotton quilting fabrics come in a 44 inch or a 110 wide fabric, and then you buy per metre however much you need. I am going to do a 4-inch strip, so to work out how much downwards or how much meterage I need, I just did 4 inches 4 times, which is 4 inches or 10 centimetres. So I bought half a metre of fabric. Now with the half a metre of fabric, I'm going to have a little bit over, but I like to neaten up the edges before I start. So I've measured the quilt from the sides down, and it is exactly 42 inches or 108 centimetres. So I know if I do my 4 inches across, I can get 1 down strip, 2 down strips, and then if I cut 2 more, I can get across, and that'll give me enough to do the lovely mitered corners. So if we cut our strips 4 inches across and then join them, we will have enough to border our quilt. So here's my 4-inch strips that I've already cut, saving a little bit of time. So they're 4 inches wide each, and I've cut them selvage to selvage, and then I've cut the little selvage tags off the ends, right, because I wanted to join them nice and neatly. So you can see there that I've gone selvage to selvage, and then I've cut all the little selvage tags off and got rid of that all. Go over to the ironing board, girls, and iron your stripping in half, because I do mine slightly different to Darlene's. It's just another method, and I thought I'd show you the second method to see which method you like. I like Darlene's, but I like mine just as nicely. Once you have ironed them all, you need to then join your 4 pieces of fabric so that you have one long strip. See, here's a join here, and then another join here, which is the second strip, and then I haven't completed this one so you could see what happens in the next one. So here's my third one. So once you've gone over to your ironing board, girls, you will then lay the strippings together so that you can stitch them in one long strip. So turn them, one strip will be right sides up like this, and just open that up again nice and neatly, and the next one you will put right sides down, and you'll have the long strip to your left and the other strip down to your right. So the one on top is wrong side up, and the one underneath is wrong side up, so right sides together. Then what you'll do is with your iron, you'll put that across the top and down the side and make it nice and neat. And then we're going to fold that like that, and then we're going to iron that piece there so that that piece and that piece looks like a perfect square. Why I iron that is going to give you the sewing line of how you're going to stitch that on. So then you can then put a pin in the top here and in the pin in the bottom. And this top piece here that comes down, you're going to make sure that the edge of your fold starts on the edge of the fabric. I'm hoping my husband can zoom in there so you can see that. And you've got this beautiful, what do you call that piece? Well, that piece there, nice and neat. And this piece here where you finish at the bottom finishes right on the edge of that point there. So then you'll go across to the sewing machine and you'll stitch from that point to that point. So when you open it out, your stripping is just going to continue beautifully. So you've got these 2 points here. I'm hoping Rick can see that. They're beautifully stitched. See, nice and square there, and again nice and square up the top here. Then you're going to iron that nice and you're going to trim that. So we're just going to trim this. You can do that with your blades or with your scissors or however else you want. And I'm just going to trim this off. I better get back in so you can see. And I'm just going to trim this off like this. Leaving about probably a 1/4 inch seam. Then you're going to go back to your ironing board, which I'm not going to have to do. And then you're going to iron this with the seam open, like this. And then you're going to fold this beautiful piece of fabric back in half, like this. And now when you hold it out, you can see that's nice. It just runs beautifully. It doesn't even look like a seam. All right, all the edges are together here, and that is just it just makes that beautiful seam line. Now we're going to start down the bottom of our quilt. I normally find the halfway mark. I just fold it in half. There's my halfway point. Honey, can you do me a favour and tell me if I'm in the where I need to be, or whether I need to move forward or back, please?
Where you are is good.
Good, thank you. All right, so just testing, girls. Sorry about that, and boys. Okay, so I'm going to start off in the middle of my quilt, and I'm actually going to have a little bit of tail. So I'm not going to start right here with this bit. I want a bit of a tail. So if I go ahead and measure the width of the fabric, which is, if I can open it again, the width of the fabric wide from my halfway point, I can put my pin here. I don't need to go that far, but I need to know that I go at least halfway between there and there. All right, so that's where I'm going to start my stitching from, which is halfway. But I'm actually not going to start on the top fabric. I'm actually going to stitch on the underneath part. There's our halfway mark there. So I'm going to actually start from there, but I'm going to just stitch along here 1/4 of an inch first till about that far, and then I'll come back and I'm going to stitch on top. So I'm going to go over to the sewing machine now, and I'm going to show you what I mean. You can go ahead and pin it if you want to, girls, or just pull it along as you go. So we're going over to the sewing machine. I hope I've made sense. I'm a bit tired today. So here's the halfway quilt. This is where I'm hoping my quilt will end up joining, because I am actually going to fold this piece down like this when I start off, and I'm going to stitch from there. So that's how we're going to fold it. We're going to fold that little tag in like this. Better move the pin. Fold that in like this. That makes that nice sharp point, and I'm going to stitch from about here just to stitch that down, and then I'm going to come back, pull that down and stitch from there. All right, over to the sewing machine. Okay, so just to recap, girls, I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch seam. I have ironed my fabric, my 4 inches in half. I have found the middle of where I wanted my fabric. I've moved the tail up a little bit more than the width of the fabric, and then I folded this first little piece down to form this triangle. Now I'm actually going to start stitching, and I'm going to stop after a little bit because I just want to catch this tail piece here. So I am just going to catch this little tail piece here by just stitching across here for a couple of inches, not far, just enough to hold that down so when I come back later it's not going to be in my way at all. Okay, so just going to move it. That'll do me. Only so when I come back later I can actually move this up without it actually being in my way. So I'm now going to fold this piece neatly down here, and I'm going to leave that little bit where I've sewn to. So I've sewn up to here. I've sewn up to here, girls, underneath. So I'm going to just leave that folded there, and I'm going to start up here because I'm actually going to come back when I get right around the quilt, and I'm actually going to sew on there. So, and then I'm just going to go now and just stitch all the way down here. I should have my walking foot on, which I don't have on. And I'm just going to sew my edges on. Now you've all been shown by Darlene how to beautiful mitered corners, how to do them. I'll show you one more time. Got my beautiful 1/4 inch here. And I'm going to stop exactly the same distance from the corner of the fabric inwards as what I'm stitching this way. I don't have my little gadget with me, so I'm going to do it with maybe a little book here. So there is where my needle is, and the edge of my fabric is there. So I can see that I need to go this wide from the corner. Here is my fabric. So I need to stop stitching that far away from the edge of the fabric, which is my 1/4 inch. All right? So once I get to there, I'm going to stop. Which is there. I'm going to lift up my foot, and then I am going to stitch from where I am to the corner of the fabric. Right off the edge to the corner of my fabric is where I'm going to stitch. So I'm going to turn it like this, and I'm going to stitch off to this point here. Just like that, girls. Right, and that just forms this little stitch off part here. Now, your fabric then needs to go to do your mitered corner. So we fold the fabric up so that it's lines straight up. Let me just put this under here so you can see what I'm doing. So the line straight up and straight down forms a very, very neat straight line upwards. Okay? And then, of course, we're going to fold this down. So once again, it goes right on the edge there, and it follows that line straight down. So we've got the one across the top perfectly straight in line with this selvage, and this one perfectly in line with this selvage. It's going to go back into the fabric again, back into my corner, start again. Away we go again, right down to the next one. Okay, girls, I'll be back when I get right round the quilt. You know how to do the other bits. All right, so what I've done is I've stitched all the way around, but I've stopped about 1.5 inches or 2 inches away from where the tail, not where I started stitching, but where the tail of the shape here sits. And the reason why I've done that is because this piece needs to be tucked inside this piece, and you'll see why I stitched this down, but I didn't actually start stitching here until I've got this far. So what we need to do is we need to lay our fabric down here like this and go, right, where is that going to come to? Where is that? This tail has to tuck in here, so it has to come past this selvage, this fold here, I mean. So I normally take it up to where I've started stitching. So if I lay that along there like that and get my trusty scissors and cut it off around about where I've started stitching in a nice straight line, that's my tail done. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open this up, this fold up here where I've stitched this down and I've tucked this in, and we're going to lay this one inside this one. And we're going to do this nice and neat so that it sits on the bottom, and we've tucked the top in up here. All right, and that's why you don't stitch all the way. That's a tad long, it's catching on the stitching. I just need to cut a little tiny bit more off. Okay, it has to be tucked in there and go past this fold point, ladies and gentlemen. It's got to go past this fold point, which is why I stitched the bottom piece down just to hold that nice and neat, and then I tuck this bit back in here like this. All right, using a pin is probably easier. Pins come in handy for lots of tuckings. Got that nice and square there, and I've got that nice and square there, and I've got that pushed in there. So I'm going to push this in a little bit more so that when that stitches down, that's going to be stitched down nice and tight. All right, so I'll go back over to the sewing machine now, and I'm going to stitch that down. So what I'll do now at the sewing machine, just put a pin in here so you can see, I'll get my hands out of the way. What I'll do is on the sewing machine now, I'll stitch right along here, and I'll stitch right back up to the stitching on this piece here. All right, so back we'll go, and then I'll come back after I've stitched that piece and show you what next we're going to do. So back. So just to recap, we've tucked the tail in, we've cut it off, and I'm going to stitch where I finished, right over the top of where I started. What's going on with my sewing machine? Nope, something's going on. I need to stop now. that at all, did it? Missed. Let's just go and see what we've done. Okay, I'll start it. Do it. Have to cut that all out, that one. Let's try again. Come to this little piece, take my time, make sure this is caught, make sure it doesn't pucker anywhere at all. Make sure it's nice and flat. And then I'm going to stitch that straight into the rest of the stitching up here. Now let's go over to the ironing board and I'll show you how to iron it and what to do with that, the binding at the back and how I'm going to finish that. Right, so we're just going to give this a quick iron flat. Now girls, as you know, our mitered corners will just tuck around like this. So what I am going to do is I'm going to iron all of the selvage upwards because I'm going to actually tuck this down here and fancy stitch the front, which will come half on and half on the back. So what I'm going to do is just make sure this is nice and tight ironed on this way. And then we'll go over to the sewing machine again and we'll do this as well. I'll show you how to pin it and then you can go ahead and stitch it all. The iron will become your best friend, everybody. I know ironing, you hate it, but trust me, if you do it, if you iron it, much easier to sew it if you iron it first. You can see I've missed every single corner so far. I'll come back and do the corners in a minute. Just want to get the selvage where I want it up and neat, like this. Now I'll come and do the corners. Bit that I've caught. Okay, so I'm going to iron the corner like this. So I've ironed that corner right in there nice and flat. And then I'm going to fold this down just on the edge of the stitching line, just missing it. And there's our beautiful mitered corner, top and bottom. Like this. Oops. I need to come this way a bit more. I'm just going to catch that here. The next one, on that corner in there, you may want to cut those corners, girls, give them a, if you want to, I don't. Another little mitered corner, should come straight into there. It's wanting to come down a little bit, and I'm wanting to stick it up a little bit more. Another mitered corner, give a corner and iron, hold that down, back into the corner, hold that down. And if you have a quick look here, you can see that that's almost a perfect mitered corner there. All right, and then I'm just going to go ahead and pin this, girls, and then I'm going to stitch on this side. Right, we'll be back in a minute. So now we've got all the mitered corners nicely. Just going to iron this all flat now. So this is the back of the quilt, girls. Just going to go back to the sewing machine and I'm going to do a little fancy stitch that'll catch the bottom and the top. I'm not going to ditch stitch this one. You can if you want to. I was going to just put a little fancy stitch. I'll see when I get over to the sewing machine what I feel like doing. All right, so that will be your quilt, girls. Let me just finish this little bit of an iron part here. And we're ready to go over and finish our... Oh, missed that one. And finish our... Here we go. Quilt off. As you see on the front, and minor corners are beautiful. Just to recap, I've stitched the binding on. I've then folded it over and I've ironed it, and as you can see, all the back mitered corners are beautiful and all the front ones are beautiful. I've then just put a couple of pins in just to let me know where I'm going to be stitching on the edge, and I've decided to do this one with just a little bit of a fancy stitch. Now, I don't like to start in the middle of a quilt when I'm doing a fancy stitch. I'd rather start on the corner or on the edge. So I'm going to start over here and I'll come back around to this spot just in case the little pattern doesn't actually finish where I want it to go. So I'm just going to do a little fancy stitch, which will take 2 little stitches on, 2 little stitches off, 2 little stitches on and 2 little stitches off. When I get to the corner, my machine will do its magic, and I will wait for it to come in, and then I will turn the corner. Corner. Oops, I need to take another couple of stitches. And then it will come off. And it will catch all that for me. I may like to come back later if I want to and actually catch the seam. So here we are, we've completely gone around the quilt with the little fancy stitch, as you can see there, just caught it. This is where we joined the quilt pieces together, nice and neat, see, it just finishes it off quite nicely like that. And as you can see, it's just caught the back of the quilt, it's not going to go anywhere. All the mitered corners have come out pretty well perfect. As you can see here, they're absolutely almost spot on, see? You've got the little fancy stitch around the outside of this quilt, and we're done. So girls, I had many requests last time, and some of you were very disappointed that my wonderful husband, who does these videos for Darlene and I, didn't wave. So he's consented to wave to you tonight, and after much begging on my part, and I must admit I've had to say to him that I'll cook his favourite cakes for the next 3 months. He's consented to actually smile for you all. So he's going to lift up his little mirror here and he's going to smile and say, thank you girls for allowing us into your home, boys, for allowing us into your home. So here's my husband, girls. And I like him. Bye, ladies and gentlemen. Nine. So here he is, everyone. Much better than the photo. This is my wonderful husband. Love you. Thank you for watching. Hope you had a good time. Bye.